was written and directed by Paul Schrader, who also wrote but did not direct Taxi Driver. It's the story of a man named Jake, played by George C. Scott, searching for his missing daughter in the dark underworld of pornography in the late 1970s. But hardcore doesn't begin in darkness, it begins in light. It begins in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Here, there are no Lynchian intimations of small-town life masking a dangerous and scary world of creeps and weirdos. It's Christmas in Grand Rapids, and Jake's family, the Van Dorns, are gathering for dinner at Jake's sister's house. In the kitchen, a conversation is taking place about the nature of sin. The Van Dorns are Dutch Reformation. Paul Schrader has said that the boy seated at the table, listening quietly as the grown-ups talk, is a snapshot from his own life. That he himself was once upon a time a boy sitting at a table and listening quietly as the grown-ups talked. He's inserted an experience from his own life into the narrative. This is Jake's daughter, Kristen. She's played by Isla Davis. And look here, it's Dick Sargent, who played the second Darren on Bewitched. Here, he's Jake's brother-in-law, Wes. Jake and his daughter live alone. Where is Mrs. Van Dorn? Do we assume she's dead? Perhaps we see a large, close-knit family in what appears to be a deeply religious community, and divorce doesn't occur to us. Jake's daughter, Kristen, and Wes's daughter, Marcia, leave for California, and then Jake returns to his normal routine. He owns a company that makes chairs, and he's not happy with what the woman he's hired to design his new office has done. It's too blue. It's no accident that Schrader frames Jake and the giant Van Dorn sign behind him so that it's just Jake and the last three letters of his name on screen together, as if the word porn is hovering behind him. If you think this is a stretch, that I'm reading too much into it, note that Jake's problem with his new office is that it's too blue, and that porn movies used to be called blue movies. Jake doesn't like it blue. A few days later, Jake gets a call. Bad news. Kristen has disappeared from Knott's Berry Farm, and so Jake is going to California. Wes joins him, and soon Marcia recounts the story of the last time she saw Kristen. Mrs. Steensma from the church group says the girls met an older boy. Peter Boyle plays Andy Mast, the private detective Jake hires to find his daughter. And so Jake returns home. Several weeks or possibly even months pass, and then Mast arrives in Grand Rapids. He has news. He's arranged the use of a porn theater and asks Jake if he knows what a hardcore movie is. Jake is a character in a film, and the plot of this film requires him to enter a theater, take a seat, and stare up at the screen. And so Jake doesn't grab Mast by the lapels and shake him and demand to know what any of this has to do with his daughter. Because honestly, unless you're a character in a film serving the requirements of a script that is building to a melodramatic reveal, your brain is going to make the obvious connection between the detective you hired to find your missing daughter and that detective suddenly turning up in your hometown and talking about pornography. But since Jake is a character in a film, he remains calm, enters the theater, and takes his seat. It's not until his daughter appears on screen that Jake catches on. Schrader wanted the big reveal to take place in a porn theater for obvious dramatic reasons, playing on his audience's fear of walking into an adult movie house and seeing a loved one up on the screen, and so the script forced Jake to behave in an unrealistic manner to get him into his seat. Mast returns to LA and visits a porn set and asks questions. Ramada, a porn producer, doesn't recognize Jake's daughter. One of the actresses here is played by a real adult film actress named Serena. It's not unusual to spot adult film stars in small roles in legit productions from the era. For example, Jamie Gillis in the underrated Sylvester Stallone thriller Nighthawks, and Amber Lynn and many others in 52 Pickup. The other girl on the bed is Nikki. Nikki is played by Susan Hubley. We'll be seeing her again later. Jake flies out to LA. He goes to see Mast, who isn't alone. Apparently Jake thinks it's his business who Mast sleeps with. Oh, those religious prudes. As if all this isn't absurd enough, he throws Mast out of his own apartment. If you're wondering why Mast allowed himself to be thrown out of his own apartment, it's because the script requires Jake to be alone with Mast's files on the porno underworld. Having stolen Mast's files, Jake goes to an adult bookstore. He looks like a cop, so no one wants to talk to him. He goes to a place that offers nude body-to-body contact. I don't think I want body-to-body contact, Jake says. Jake has questions, but he has to pay to talk. The girl doesn't know anything. Jake loses his temper and is thrown out. Jake changes his look. Maybe if he looks less like a cop, people will trust him and want to talk to him. He goes to see Mast's contact, Ramada. He uses a fake name, DeVries. We've heard this name before. When Kristen boarded the bus, the woman called it out twice, and at Jake's chair factory it was mentioned as the name of Jake's competition. When Jake uses the name, is he intending to implicate the real DeVries? No. It seems more like he's just amusing himself. Jake tells Ramada that he wants to finance a porn movie. Ramada thinks he just wants to get laid. He doesn't need Jake's money, but he invites him to the set of one of his movies. There, Jake meets Nikki, and Ed Begley Jr. is there. Jake places an ad for male porn actors attempting to find one of the men in the scene with his daughter. The interviews go on all day, but eventually the man he's looking for shows up. His name is Jim. Jim. He remembers Jake's daughter, says she was a freaky bitch, and Jake hits him with a lamp. Jim tells him about Todd. Jake threatens to hit him with a shower massager, and Jim tells him that Nikki can help him find Todd. So Jake goes to see Nikki. Our tour of the sexual underworld continues. Schrader is using Jake's quest to show us everything, a scary field guide for suburban straights. This is a porno theater, this is a brothel, this is the set of an adult film, this is a private encounters booth. Nikki recognizes Jake. She recognizes Kristen in the photo Jake shows her. Kristen was with Todd, who might be in San Diego. Jake says he's a detective, that he's been hired to find the girl, and offers to pay Nikki for her help. Jake has just hired his first prostitute. Way to go, Jake! In Jake's motel room, Nikki asks the question that's been on the minds of some of us for a while now. What about Jake's wife? She's dead, Jake says. Later, at the airport, Jake and Nikki talk about religion. His church is Dutch Reformation, a Calvinist denomination. She asks if they believe in reincarnation. Nikki believes in reincarnation. She's a Venusian. In San Diego, their conversation continues. Jake is hard to talk to. Whatever Nikki says, he vibes disapproval. When he scolds her for eating too much junk food, it seems for a moment that Schrader might be playing a father-daughter dynamic between the two of them, using Nikki as a surrogate for Kristen to give us some insight into the kind of father he was, but no. Jake doesn't care about Nikki or anything she does. He's not scolding her because he cares about her, he's scolding her because he's a scold. Unless this is the kind of father he was, in which case, yes, insight. I could watch a whole movie of just these two people talking to each other. It's one of the best parts of the film. In a bar, they talk to someone who knows Todd. He tells them that Todd is with someone named Rattan. Next stop, San Francisco, where Mast returns and tells Jake that Rattan is a bad, bad man. Nikki gets Jake a meeting with Todd, who says he doesn't know Rattan. He offers to show Jake a movie. Is it the one with Kristen? Todd says yes, but it's obvious he's just trying to get Jake's money. This is a Hollywood movie about the porn business, so it should come as no surprise what kind of movie Jake is about to see. No, not a porn movie. Jake has already seen porn movies. It's a Hollywood movie about pornography, so you guessed it, it's time for snuff. Kristen is not in the movie, but Rattan is. Despite its content, unlike the last time he sat in a room and watched a movie, Jake doesn't beat up the chair in front of him. Back at the motel, Mast tells Nikki about her bleak future after Jake finds his daughter. Nikki thinks Jake will take care of her. Jake comes back, and Nikki's reluctance to cooperate makes him angry. She confesses her fear that he'll abandon her, and Jake slaps her. He's ready to punch her in the face when she gives up Todd's location. Then he calms down. I won't forget you, he says. Nikki is a prostitute. She has a pimp. She's probably used to this kind of thing. But is Jake? It's hard not to think about the possible father-daughter dynamic at play between these two and what this violence and tenderness double feature implies about the relationship between Jake and his actual daughter. Jake goes to a dungeon to find Todd. Depending on your point of view, Todd is either attacking Jake or defending himself. And then Todd runs. There's a person-sized cage hanging from the ceiling, symbolism of an empty cage in a blue room. Jake expects his daughter to be a prisoner in the world of pornography, a victim, but there's no one in the cage, no prisoner, no victim. Outside, Jake catches Todd, who tells him that Rattan is at the Matador. By the time Nikki and Mast arrive on the scene, Jake, the angry bull charging the Matador, is gone. Jake confronts Rattan, and then, as if responding to the dramatic musical cue on the soundtrack, the girl seated on the other side of the table from Rattan stands up and turns around. It's her, of course. Rattan runs, Jake in pursuit, but it's Mast who stops Rattan by shooting him in the back. Jake, meanwhile, descends into the basement of the Matador to find his daughter. When she sees him, her first words are, "Don't hurt me." It says a lot about Kristen's life in the Van Dorn home that her first words to her father are a plea against physical violence. This is never followed up on, but that earlier scene with Nikki doesn't exactly show Jake in the best light vis-a-vis restraint in the area of beating up girls. Jake tells Kristen that he understands it was bad for her, but it doesn't matter what Rattan and the others made her do because it's over now. But Rattan and the others didn't make her do anything, she says. She wanted to do it. She wanted to leave home, and she wanted to make fuck films. Her father never cared for her, she says. You robbed my life. It would be a perfect ending if she stood up and left, if she disappeared into the crowded streets of North Beach. But it's not a perfect ending. It's not bad, but it's rushed. Jake tells her he loves her, she tells him to leave, but soon they reconcile and he puts his blood-stained coat around her shoulders and leads her out of the basement. Jake sees Nikki. He approaches her, tries to talk to her, but she gives him an angry look and walks away. Jake asks Mast if there's anything he can do for her. Mast tells him to go home. There's nothing you can do. You don't belong here, Mast says. One almost expects him to say, forget it, Jake, it's North Beach. Jake joins his daughter in the back of the cop car. With its echoes of Chinatown, Jake and his daughter in the car is especially resonant, especially if you think about what the film has implied about Jake as an abusive father to Kristen. And that's the movie. Throughout the film, Paul Schrader uses details to comment on the action and throws in quite a bit of resonant scenery. When Jake plays detective for the first time, searching Kristen's room for clues, there's a poster of the actor Parker Stevenson looking over his shoulder. Parker Stevenson played a detective on The Hardy Boys, a popular TV series at the time. When Mass tells Jake the real deal about how porn movies are made and distributed, he does so by a Coke machine that reads, "Here's the real thing." When religious man Jake arrives at Mass, on the side of the fridge is a bumper sticker that reads, "Jesus is coming," and he's mad as hell. And when Jake is led out of the brothel and thrown headfirst into the side of a parked car, on the bench across the street it reads, "Impact." When Mast returns after disappearing from the movie for a while, there's this sign. And when Mast attempts to disabuse Nikki of the idea that Jake will take care of her, the resonant show for Nikki to be watching is obviously All in the Family. I don't believe that Schrader included Star Wars in his film merely because it was popular at the time. Star Wars is a movie about the search for and rescue of a princess, and Schrader wants us to understand that this is Jake's story as well. Hanging on the wall in Kristen's bedroom is a Star Wars calendar. Note the image, Darth Vader choking a man for information. Darth Vader, Dark Father. Jake, a father, will soon be resorting to similar means to acquire the information he's looking for. There's the transition scene where old Jake becomes new Jake. It's simple and it's subtle. The camera leaves old Jake on the bed to pan across the room over things representative of the man he once was, the faithful choir singing hymns on TV, the suit and tie that made him look like a cop to everyone he met, and then moves over to the window to show us an advertisement on the side of the theater across the street for Star Wars. Old Jake is gone and only the mission remains, find and rescue the princess. And the Star Wars motif returns as two girls on stage at a strip club engage in a sexy lightsaber duel. With the film's use of Star Wars and the search for and rescue of a princess motif, is there anything about the confrontation between Jake and Rattan that reminds us of the confrontation between good and evil in George Lucas's film? Aside from the obvious, it's just incidental details. Dressed all in white, Rattan represents a negative image of Darth Vader. Where Darth Vader switches on his lightsaber, Rattan flicks open a switchblade. Schrader couldn't have known at the time that he chose to use Star Wars and its search for and rescue of a princess story as a point of not-so-subtle resonance in his own film that George Lucas would soon reveal that the villain who kidnapped the princess, held her against her will, drugged and abused her, and was at the very least complicit in the destruction of her home, was in fact her own father. Knowing this, as anyone seeing the film after the release of Return of the Jedi would, changes the way one sees the Star Wars motif in Schrader's film. Jake makes chairs. Throughout the film, Schrader uses chairs to tell us about Jake and his state of mind. Here in Jake's home, before he finds out about his daughter's new career, a chair sits beneath a bunch of signs bearing religious messages, symbolizing Jake alone with his faith. When he sees the movie with his daughter, Jake attacks the chair in front of him. Are we meant to interpret this as a demonstration of self-loathing? As we've seen, chairs in this film are used to represent Jake. Nikki is a porn actress and a prostitute. If any piece of furniture can be said to represent Nikki, why not a bed? And so, when Nikki enters Jake's motel room, they each assume their position on the representative piece of furniture. Nikki, cool and relaxed on the bed, Jake, stiff and awkward on a chair. In the back of an adult bookstore, our attention is called to a single chair with a damaged leg. When Jake enters the dungeon, the camera lingers on this shot of a man alone on a chair in a straitjacket. His eyes are closed. It's an important shot, at least symbolically. See the room as Jake's state of mind. There's a big bed in the middle of the room. In fact, the bed dominates the shot. But the bed is empty. Jake's wife has left him, and Jake is alone. The straitjacket implies madness. Has the search for his daughter made Jake crazy? He's certainly acting crazy. In front of him, a fake fireplace. The hell he's facing, with his eyes closed, isn't real. He's gone insane and doesn't want to admit the truth, and this porno underworld is only hell in his own mind. It should also be noted that the wall the fireplace is painted on is made of cardboard. The world Jake is traveling through isn't real. Or rather, it's the real world, but it's been hopelessly distorted by Jake's perception of it. If the movie Jake watched is also a fake and Rattan never killed anyone, then the symbolism of this room becomes especially potent, especially as it echoes the scene earlier in the film with the chair alone in the room surrounded by religious messages. And then, of course, and most obviously, there's Rattan himself. Rattan is a kind of chair. Schrader is setting up a battle of the chairs. Either that, or by naming Rattan after a chair, he's implying that Jake and Rattan have more in common than Jake would care to admit. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, remember to click like. If you didn't like it, click like ironically, and I'll see you in the next one.